Well, thanks to all the folks who have joined us today. I'm Natalie Webb with ProfitCo. And our webinar today is based on aspiration to achievement about OKRs and in the nonprofit space. My co-host today in this webinar is Mile Green. He is the president and CEO of World Relief. Welcome, Mile. Thank you for joining us in this webinar today to talk about OKRs.
Thank you, Natalie. It's fantastic to be here, and thanks to all the people who've logged in and joined to participate in this conversation with us.
Yeah, awesome to have you. Tell us a little bit more about World Relief and what your mission is.
Sure. So World Relief is a global humanitarian organization which partners with local churches and communities to bring sustainable solutions to some of the world's biggest crises, whether those are natural disasters, extreme poverty, the global refugee crisis that's going on in the world today. And the work that we do has us working in 12 countries around the world, as well as more than 16 cities around the United States, providing service to refugees and immigrants in the United States as well.
Wow, such important work and a large group. I think, did I read almost 100,000 volunteers globally? Is that right?
Yeah, we have more than 100,000 volunteers annually in the projects, and more than 2,000 employees in the agency in the US and around the world.
Wow, that's extensive. And I have to say, in doing research about your OKR journey and you implementing OKRs with ProfitCo using the tool, I was so impressed at your global reach and all of the things that you're helping with. It was quite extensive, and I was shocked I had not heard more about it. And of course, I wanted to volunteer.
We're going to sign you up.
Yes, absolutely. I'm in. Yeah, so tell me, how did you really sort of start the journey and deciding to go with OKRs in the nonprofit space? Like, how did you begin?
Well, that's an excellent question. We really began our OKR journey about 2 years ago as an organization, and it coincided with the launch of a new strategy, a new strategic plan that we were leaning into. And I've been with World Relief for 16 years. The last 2 years have been in the role as president and CEO. And as I stepped into that role as we launched this new strategy, one thing that became really clear and apparent is that if we wanted to be successful in implementing this plan, we needed to have greater collaboration and focused execution as a team, more so than we've ever had before. And one of the things that I realized in where we were as an organization is that we didn't have a common set of goal setting to use throughout the whole organization. So different departments or major divisions of the organization were setting very compelling and meaningful goals and objectives, but they were using different systems and processes. And we know there's many different ways to do that out there and methodologies. A couple were using OKRs and didn't have visibility that they were both using OKRs, and some others were using different tools. And so really we made a conscious decision that OKRs was going to be a crucial step in bringing that unity and collaboration in the organization that would help us really move forward together as an organization.
Nice. So were you able to sort of see the moment or recognize the results when you began closing the gap between strategy and execution using OKRs? Was that something that was really visible or that you witnessed happen when you first started, or even into the first, second quarters?
Yeah, well, we started the journey really by developing 4 very clearly developed objective statements that focused on the attainment of our mission, our financial goals, some of our internal initiatives, and our staff goals. And for each one of those goals, we developed a very specific set of 2-year horizon goals that we're working towards, and then immediate term change management objectives and details there. And so then we began by really mapping those out with each of those strategic objectives being on an annual or multi-year objective for the organization, and building out both the short-term and the longer-term key results that we're looking at. And so what that helped us really do is that as we launched into some of the change management that fits at the front end of any strategic plan, we were able to see very clear, obtainable results on the front end to point to internal stakeholders, external stakeholders that highlight this is what we're working towards, we're achieving this, we're moving this forward. But it also made sure that we saw how those immediate actions were grounded in a longer term commitment to the plan. And I as a leader, I found it incredibly helpful in being able to communicate and create deeper organizational understanding of what those objectives are and how teams and individuals can find themselves in each of those objectives for the organization.
So would you say that was maybe one of the superpowers that you were able to sort of figure out or realize as a result of rolling out OKRs for world relief?
Yeah, so I love the term superpowers. The John Doerr book, Measure What Matters,
right,
talks about it has such wonderful language there. John Doerr just talks so much about the importance of the objective being inspirational and motivational for the team,
yes,
and he just uses such expressive motivational language in that book. And so I love that, and I love this idea of superpowers. Two of them that I think really come to mind that have been so transformational for us as an institution are the superpowers around focus and alignment. And anytime I think about this in context of my organization, where I've worked for a very long time, and other nonprofits, I think back to a Robert Kaplan article I read many years ago, who's the father of the balanced scorecard approach. And in that, he talks about that nonprofits tend to attract people who enter the organization for very altruistic reasons. They believe deeply in the mission of the agency. They come in with that commitment. Oftentimes they're making financial sacrifices to join that organization. And with that comes this great value to the organization. It's a real benefit to it. But oftentimes, many of these people come in with this high degree of motivation and deep connectedness and very strong opinions about how the organization should be doing its work and achieving its work. And a lot of other researchers kind of highlight that that's a big difference between the for-profit and the nonprofit sectors. In the nonprofit sector, we end up having a double bottom line or a triple bottom line and these other things that we're trying to achieve. And so we lose focus as to really clearly what the organization is trying to accomplish. And people bring their own intentionality and perspectives to, I'm here because this is the result I want to see in my community, or this is the result I want to see on our team, and kind of miss the bigger picture strategy where we're trying to align our resources to that. And so for us, OKRs have really helped us explicitly state what the objectives are at an enterprise level, what the objectives are at a team level. And then once we have that very clearly defined framework and clarification, what it does is we've stepped into an alignment journey that's been really beneficial for us to share and communicate across teams. And so we see that vertical alignment where we can set targets, make it very clear what we're working towards. I think one things with nonprofits is we tend to be institutions that by our nature seek out leadership by consensus more so than you see in the for-profit sector. And I think that this is part of organizational culture in many nonprofit institutions. But what I love about OKRs, if we go through a cycle of setting them, leadership can cast vision. We go through a process of getting feedback from teams downline, and then they can feed up suggestions there. And then as we finalize and set our objectives and key results, really, we've got a lot of buy-in very early on. That vertical up, top down, bottom up, finding that right balance is really crucial and valuable in that. And then within that, once that alignment's in place, it really helps us have that horizontal alignment where we're regularly communicating across teams and have that understanding. And so that the sales or marketing team, the fundraising team is really linked in with what the programmatic objectives are for the organization. And we have a lot more synergy with that. And so that's just been a huge benefit to the methodology.
Nice. Very well stated. One question I have around metrics, and you talked about the balanced scorecard and even having annual and then perhaps even 2-year goals. Was it a challenge at all to focus on sort of quarterly metrics and how to measure your results from a quarterly perspective, and that OKR cadence of, every 90 days planning and then executing and then sort of the reset retrospective? So more around quality metrics for quarters?
Yeah, so I think this was an interesting journey for us, and I think it's still one that even 2 years in, we're still trying to tweak and get right.
Yeah.
What I think the big headline on this, and I think for any other leader who's considering how to make sure that OKRs are effective, it's crucial to make sure that your objectives and key results are speaking to the big things and the major issues. And sometimes there's this temptation with OKRs only to put our change management initiative or the new big thing into that space, rather than having kind of the routine, the core, the critical operations oriented quarterly metrics that are so crucial. But what we really found is in our fundraising team, for example, they had very clearly defined monthly, quarterly, and annual lead and lag indicators related to the sales process and what that looks like. And they've done an excellent job in grafting those into their objectives and key results. And so they can have a top line objective related to increasing private revenue and what that looks like, but they've got the lead and lag indicators underneath that at the bottom that are really zeroing in on everything that has to do with making that number attainable, and what that looks like on a quarterly basis, what that looks like even on a monthly basis, and how they drive to that.
Nice. And there's a nuance to it. You said almost tightening it up each quarter as you're looking back and seeing what went well, and calling out what those potential wins are and celebrating those. Is there a way that you are able to communicate across the teams how you're celebrating the wins? I think you mentioned town halls. Is that one of the ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So every month we have a leadership town hall, which essentially takes each of our executive level staff, our vice presidents, our C-suite leaders, and their respective leadership teams. And we gather on a call for an hour. We break it down into really 3 components. First and foremost, we reinforce, do some continuing education around the superpowers. And every quarter, we're looking at a different superpower. And so we get 3 lessons across that quarter on how to apply that superpower and what we're trying to achieve and do in our work. And then we give our teams a chance to reflect on that, apply that learning. But then we go through a process of going team by team around highlighting what's going well and what's not going well. And then I actually think one of the other superpowers is around transparency, and that's crucial to that piece. Is everybody who works on a team knows that sometimes things don't work the way they're supposed to, but that we need to put away those tendencies to want to kind of, hide the parts of the team isn't doing well and get it better next month, and then we're going to talk about it. To really saying, this is an objective that we set for our team that has benefit to the enterprise. This is the progress we made. This is an objective that we're working on. We're having challenges on. How does that come to be? How does that get shared? How do we draw that out? And I think it's that benefit between celebrating the success, but also being clear about the weaknesses that simultaneously is building enthusiasm around the work that we're doing, but it's also creating trust, and how we draw that out and encourage that in the transparency.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And in some cases, I see the conversations around what you might do differently turn into building new strategies or some sort of a new process or, operational efficiency that wasn't there prior, but it gives you the opportunity to lean in and talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that's where the reset function or the quarterly redo is really critical, because inevitably, and I think any institution that's trying to implement OKRs for the first time is going to get things wrong just in the design of how you set up the objectives or the key results, right? Or there's going to be a misalignment in terms of what's practical, in terms of this is what we wanted to do, but we realized a month in we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the tools. But by having that clarity on the quarterly basis, we're able to make that timely correction, draw out an issue that's a problem. And if we made no progress on an objective, that opens up a really valid question for us as an institution. Was it the wrong thing? It just wasn't a priority. Did we draw the objective incorrectly, that we're focusing on the wrong thing? Is it not something we have resources attainable to? And really welcomes a valuable question. when you set objectives on an annual basis, you miss that quarterly cycle and you get to the end of the year and you've missed progress and things kind of didn't go where you were. And it just, every time you look during the course of the year, you know you're not making progress and you kind of ignore it and sweep it under the rug. The quarterly basis, it forces you to zero in on asking that question. We said this is important. It's not working. Why is that? And what can we do to address that in the future?
Yeah, it's a good point. I often see a lot of really great ideas on projects and work that folks want to get done. And then it comes down to prioritizing, making sure the collaborations are there. And then the capacity question always gets brought up, right? These are all really great things. Do we have the ability to execute on all of them this quarter? And then if not, no for now, but pushing it to another quarter. Did you find that there were a lot of things that folks wanted to get done that were sort of, it was too much in the first go around?
Oh my goodness, definitely. And I think this a little bit plays back into that trap of kind of the nonprofit setting, where I think if you're
Sure.
nonprofit workers, we're clearly tuned into the challenges of the world, challenges of our constituency, but we're also, generally speaking, positive thinkers who have this audacious belief that, crises like mass displacement and extreme poverty are things that can be overcome. And so we've got all these grand visions, deep commitment to want to see all of this change happen in the world. I think when we set the objectives and have that, really that last step of setting the objective is to say what actually ends up on the list and what do we leave for later. And oftentimes, when I'm meeting with my team or looking at the objectives of another team and coaching one of our executive leaders, I kind of look at that and say, is this really your objective? Are you going to be able to do all of these things? Like, we want to do all of these things. And I'm like, I want to do all of these things. But unless you can dial it in, zero in on what it is that the priority for now and what's most important right now. And I think that is one of the questions in the book is in terms of focus, it's answer the question, what's most important right now? And I think that's how we balance the tension between here's an overarching annual objective, but here's what can be done that's going to move the needle this quarter. And if we can't zero that in, then something's wrong and we got to dial it back and rethink that objective and go back to the table. And then that has the cascade and the benefit of helping project planning, project management. But then when you look at that and you say, this one team has about 16 objectives assigned to them, well, you're not going to make progress on any of them. And that really needs correction.
Yeah, just at a glance, the balance isn't there, right? Yeah, with the 3 to 5 rule. So John Doerr likes to say the sweet spot of committed work is around 60 to 70%, and the rest is stretch and sort of aspirational. Was that sort of your sweet spot, trying to figure out, what is the amount of committed work that has to get done?
This, I think to be honest, I think this is one that we're still trying to figure out. I think that works really well in kind of the IT space where OKRs are routinely used, where it's developing product design, taking products to market, a sales goal where you want to set that stretch. Other cases, I think, we have certain goals that we want to hit goals as they are. There's a funding envelope from a donor that says serve 200 people. Well, if we serve, then if we set our goal at 200 but only get 60, that's not a success, right? So we want to get the full 200, but also we don't want to overshoot that goal either, because we would maybe not offer the best services that we're going to do. So how we balance some of those things is a little different, but we've really used the feature in the Profit.co software that looks at setting what's a committed goal versus a stretch goal and try to bring that in. And I'm constantly encouraging teams to use stretch goals. And this was even a conversation we had at one of our monthly town halls, is how can you use a stretch goal appropriately? But I think you have to think carefully on what is that. Is this really a stretch goal or is this a committed goal, and making sure you're getting the right number? But there's also a nice feature in the software that I've seen several times. There's kind of this dotted line that extends past the stretch goal into that, or the committed goal into that stretch goal. And I think that's really valuable in a lot of the revenue-based targets or development-based targets where we do want to keep people to make progress beyond the minimum.
Great. I just want to welcome the other folks that have joined on the call. Again, I'm Natalie Webb with Profit Co, and we're having this session today, this webinar with Mile Green, the President and CEO of World Relief. We've received some questions, and I think we have the ability to incorporate more questions. Our handlers, if you will, running the webinar will let us know if there are any questions. So thanks for being on the call with us. That said, so Mile, one thing that I was thinking about as I was reviewing sort of your OKR journey is because of your global reach, and one of the other tenets aside from transparency in OKR is this collaboration. How challenging was that from a world perspective, many different countries and different time zones, to get the collaboration and validating that you had it?
That's a really that's a helpful question. You know, it's been a journey that we've been on. We said at the beginning, overnight, we're not taking the whole organization to the OKR system. And so we started with, right at the beginning, we started with just the executive team, learning how to write objectives. Does this clarify that? What it did is I think it actually helped that cross-team, high-level collaboration improve and increase. Then we took it down to the next level in terms of reaching and supporting the divisional level teams underneath each of those vice presidents, and how we did that. And what that really did is having everybody on that same system is really where we saw the benefit of how to do it well and how to share information across it. One of the key lessons that we really, two or three of the key lessons that we learned this. One is that we try to do as much of the training as we can as cross-departmental. So it's not just a training with one group of people in one department, that they're seeing other people in the room who they're going to be working with. And so it's not just we all know the same thing, but we all know the others know the same thing, and we can work through this. We found the real benefit in creating these roles of kind of OKR shepherds. I think that's the term they use in the book as well, and having that focal person on each team who's kind of the whiz when it comes to OKRs. We want everybody bought into the methodology, the commitment, what it is, but knowing getting into the software, getting it right, that's tough. But having those shepherds be able to share ideas, talk it through, think it through, find the solution really adds a lot of value to that. And I think also just the spirit of continuing education is so crucial with that, and making the routines and the rhythms consistent. And so every team is showing up for a town hall every month. Every team is working on their OKRs at the same time. And I think it gives that consistency a lot of value in that. And so, you know, we're now kind of getting to more of the cascaded to local office level, and what does that look like, and how do we step into it? And hopefully we've really learned a lot of lessons these 2 years that will make the collaboration more useful. Because I think the last thing we know is push something down on people and have it seem like, what is this? This is just another thing that the headquarters wants us to do. Where is it going to add value? And so we need to make sure that really there's organizational buy-in consistently as we roll it out to the next level.
Agreed. You know, one of the things I often see too, when companies roll out an OKR tool in addition to a methodology, is really getting that adoption and that sincere buy-in across the board. Were there any areas of your business where it created heartburn with things that were sort of in flight already, or was it an easy adoption process? And one of the things that comes to mind when I say that is when there's a long-standing way of doing things, you know, lights on, doors open work, some of that stuff doesn't necessarily make great key results, but all of that is necessary to keep the business running. And how do you fit the strategy on top of that? So change management, really, and rolling out the new approach.
Yeah, so I think of one department in specific. It's one of our implementation units that has, you know, its own kind of sub strategies, very well documented, almost at a level more documented than other parts of the enterprise. And so we stepped into the objective and key result journey with them, and they immediately said, well, we just finished this shared purpose document, our key roles.
Yeah.
We don't need this coming in and helping us. But then we kind of paused and said, broke down, so you've got a goal right here in this paragraph. And so how do we execute against that goal? Well, you need to know what you're trying to achieve. You need to know your key results. It fits under here. And what is, it's not a replacement of strategy. It's a tool to help you execute against a well-defined strategy. And I think that's the key thing for people to understand. I think the other piece, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is it relates to the balance between what are our routine metrics that we're just reporting on versus what are the key indicators at the heart of an objective and key result cycle, and where are those? And I think finding the right synergy. So the OKRs really help support the business model, help support the strategy, helps what we're trying to achieve. Not, if OKRs become kind of the tail wagging the dog and we're trying to do all this stuff just to support the OKR process, then we've missed the overarching point of OKRs. And I think that for us is key in really being impactful and bringing everybody on board.
Yeah. So in the spirit of it being agile in your business, I'm guessing that's probably really critical, because you can't really plan for some of the disasters that you support. So if you have OKRs in flight that might need to be paused to vector people, time and dollars, and in your case, even, volunteers, do you find that the methodology as well as the tool supports that agility?
Absolutely. I think of a very specific example where, we began this year with intentionality to expand the reach of some of our programs into into 2 new countries, recognizing 2 countries that had specific humanitarian needs. And then one of the countries where World Relief is deeply invested for many years is in Sudan, and particularly in the area in Darfur. And so those who follow the news know that there's been significant civil conflict there in the last 6 months. It's been very devastating to the humanitarian environment, and many people have fallen into greater vulnerability as a result of that. It caused a huge kind of mass displacement event, and we said everything that we're doing to serve these people is far more important than opening up that second office. So we'd already opened one of the offices, but we came in our decision point, we said, is it carrying out that objective, or is it pivoting resources to meet this need? And we said, absolutely, it's this one. Adjusted the objectives on the fly. We didn't say, well, we only did one of those 2 countries, that's not important. We missed it. It's like, no, we're still doing what's most important, and refining that and dialing in and moving resources to that is so crucial. And it helped us just with, taking, lines out of one budget that had been earmarked for that expansion and moving it over to meeting these needs. And it made a big difference.
Yeah. And it was timely, right? You could do it fairly quickly, make that adjustment. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And see that in the system. So in what way do you sort of keep a pulse on everything that you have in flight in ProfitCo and all your OKRs in flight? Do you use our dashboard features, or how do you stay abreast of things that are happening, and how, if there are challenges, are they being escalated for success to your level through the tool, or how does that happen?
Yeah, so I'm kind of constantly keeping tabs and peeking on a lot of different things. I always love the dashboards, and my favorite view is the one that's the kind of the spider wheel.
Oh yeah.
You can see here's the different objectives, here's the progress, and I can go team by team and see that. Find that very useful. Anytime we're doing in our cadence, we have we do the monthly town hall across departments, but every team that's using OKRs also has a once-a-month meeting where they're reviewing progress on their team objectives and key results. And for us, that's crucial touch point. And usually the way that meeting works is we've got the dashboard up on a shared screen. We're going objective and key result by key result, dialing that in, and kind of people are on the hot seat for 30 seconds or 2 minutes responding to this key result that was entrusted to them. Are they making progress? that's really, really helpful, really crucial. The other thing that we've done, and one of our OKR leads on the team is really gifted and kind of aggregating data and moving things out. And so we've actually built a website on our intranet that pulls data from ProfitCo and makes it accessible and visible for every employee in the organization, all 2,000. So not all 2,000 are in the OKRs on a daily basis, but that commitment to transparency, seeing what's taking place, is really crucial to building that buy-in. It's been a big part of our transparency work around OKRs as well. Is in our monthly corporate newsletter once a quarter, people get an update. These are the objectives and key results that we're working on. Click here if you want to see the results that are happening. And I find that, hey, everyone in the organization may not be clicking on to see what all the other teams are doing, but simply the act of saying, this is the progress we're making, you want to learn more, it's right here, does generate a lot of trust and support and buy-in for the bigger picture initiatives, because people know that you're really making that effort to show and educate people on it.
Nice. One of the questions I'm often asked is, do OKRs track performance at the individual level? And we often coach that while folks on a team could have ownership over a key result, we typically keep it at a team level and don't use OKRs to measure performance. Is that sort of how you're using it as well?
Typically, that's how we've built that out. Obviously there's times when a specific key result on a team is assigned to a person. Sure. But if it's a really crucial, business critical individual result that they're trying to generate, whether that's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, then that should really be built into their performance evaluation. Yes. Structure separately, and there may be a handshake and an overlap there. From that, I think that sometimes the literature on OKRs really kind of speaks against that and all of these team level development. I think that that's important, but also I think the extent to which OKRs really are communicating core business. I think what's crucial to the employee is making sure that at the onset of their performance period, we're explicit about what they're responsible for and what's in OKRs versus what's in that performance review, and holding them accountable really clearly. And so some people on like a sales side, we might see greater harmony between those two indicators. Some people more on a development side or more team level reliance may not have as much of that one-to-one alignment between performance evaluation and OKRs. But I think a lot of people are in different places across the industry on that.
Okay, thanks for that. We have a question from Patty. Do you use OKRs to measure your executive team members' performance?
So each of the executive team has a performance evaluation, the same as every other employee in the organization is. In some cases, there's a direct one-to-one for an objective or key results that they're responsible for. In other cases, they may have additional performance metrics that they're being held accountable for beyond what might be on their team objectives and key results.
Got it. One question I have about that too is coming out with the program initially and sharing communications across your organization that this is how you're going to be managing strategy. It's definitely more digital in nature using the ProfitCo tool. Did you find the change management and communication out to the team effective most in having your town hall meetings or through emails or a combination of all of that?
I think it's got to be all of it. I think repetition is so crucial to executive communication. And I think the literature supports that. My own experience supports that very much. Patrick Lencioni and several of his books talks about this really intently, and the idea that the most important responsible of a senior leader is to be the chief repeating officer. And I think actually OKRs really help that, because what it does is you've set your plan, you've set your goals, and you can go back to them and speak about them if you're meeting with this team, or you're meeting with your executive team, or you're meeting with your board, you're speaking the same message about what the organization is prioritizing. And you're hitting it in your newsletters, you're hitting it in your individual updates and staff meetings, you're hitting it hopefully in what your leaders are cascading to the teams that they work with. And I think that that's crucial. I think sometimes leaders may be hesitant to be repetitive. And I think Lencioni has whether it was in a podcast that I listened that he was on or something else, but he basically says repetition is confidence. And oftentimes, if you just want to be the leader and bring a new idea every time you speak to a room and test something out different, that's great. But if you're repeating it over and over and over again, you're tying yourself to the importance of that idea and that success. And that does take confidence in yourself, and that takes confidence in the plans. But I think if you go through the effort to build good objectives and key results, then at the end of the day, you really can have confidence in that work and lean into it and mobilize your team around it.
Yeah, I think there's nothing better than the results proving that it's working, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question came in. Do you share your OKRs with the board of directors? And if yes, how so? Question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's part of our routine cadence and reporting cycle, and fits right into that. And I think we've tried to really help our board understand what are objectives, key results. I think oftentimes they're more interested in things at a longer term strategic level than the quarterly day-to-day. And I think that that's really where their governance function sits, is at that broader, bigger picture piece. And so we really want to make sure that we're communicating at that enterprise level strategic objective. What are the progress we're making on that? But again, I think it also helps in that reporting cycle because it's important to communicate. This is what our plan is. This is what we're going to do. This is the progress we've made against that, and where we're going, and this is where we think we're going to be at the end of the year. And I think what that helps is it reduces that mystery and that vision. I've had the pleasure of sitting on boards of nonprofits before, and now I report to a board. And I think oftentimes there's that question of, is management coming in with something different every time they meet with us?
Yeah.
Ability to come in and be consistent, saying, this is what we're working on, this is the priority, this is the progress. I think it helps the board be more effective in their role and know what they're looking at and really have confidence. And I think going back to this idea of transparency, I think being as transparent as possible with the board is really valuable. And I think there's a lot of people who sit in roles similar to mine that have that degree of hesitation.
Yeah.
And these are the people who decide if I keep my job or not. But I think with any other supervisor, I've always found that my supervisors that I was transparent about, this isn't working, this is the problem, this is working, this is going well, are those whom I had the best relationship with. And so I think that that's where OKRs can be real helpful and make that meaningful.
One thing I like to share with teams I work with, there's a slight bit of fear, I think, leaning into a new methodology like this, when you're asking folks to be really transparent about what they're working on and what they hope to achieve. And an old professor shared this little quote with me, and it is, there is no security through obscurity. You really got to be fully transparent to embrace the benefits. So I think you were saying the exact same thing. Another question came in. While using OKRs, did you experience any benefits that you didn't expect at first?
That's probably, there's a bunch on the list. I think one thing that comes to mind is I didn't expect so many people to latch onto it so quickly. And I think for us, we were really trying to fulfill this void of ambiguity between departments and what expectations were. And so I think for some of the long-termers, the benefit really was, wow, it's much more clear now, things are broken down, we can get to the you're meeting a felt need, right? And we appreciate that, and able to step into it wholeheartedly, which was great. I was afraid it was gonna be a lot of old way of doing things. So that was a surprise. I think the other thing that was a totally unexpected I understand what happened and it's a good thing. But a lot of our new employees, I really saw them in their onboarding journey go a lot faster and get a lot more connectedness to this idea of I know what's expected of me. So they join a team, know, hey, the digital team is working with this and we've got these acquisition goals and this is what we're working towards, can slot in right away, know what they're working on. You can welcome new team members to have that. Now, I didn't necessarily envision that necessarily as a benefit of OKRs, but it really does, I think, help with making sure that people have that onboarding question answered early and know how their contribution fits into the bigger picture from the beginning. I think that oftentimes is something we take for granted with longstanding employees, but it's so crucial for the new employees to have that.
Right. Do you find it's easier to give kudos and celebrate wins through the transparency you see in the profit tool?
Definitely, I think where it's that kind of, you get to the end of the quarter and it's like, you look back and said, wow, all of this progress was made. And that's something to be proud of. Where I think, in my role, and I think a lot of other leaders' role, you just kind of see it's kind of that accumulation of small thing after small thing after small thing after small thing. And then, getting to, here's a big objective we had for the quarter or several quarters in a row, we had these objectives, and look at where we are today. And that's something that we just would have missed along the way of just another action, another thing, and it gives that space to celebrate and really look back and say that this is a big accomplishment and we're really happy about this. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that is just a big benefit of taking the pause and being intentional, reflecting back. I think we'll do that. Managers who are good at individual performance reviews do a good job of doing that at the individual level and pointing to some of those successes. Sometimes we don't do that well as a team. And
honestly though, I mean, a quarter goes by so fast, it seems, right? And often when I'm facilitating sessions at the end of the quarter and folks are saying something that went well, I'd say, well, is this your big win? And they're like, yeah, actually, this is really right, because they're so immersed in the work and getting those results. It is a time to pause and say, yeah, this was a huge win for the business, for our team and for the business. So I think you're right. I think in some cases, folks are working so hard that it does take that little bit of a pause at the end of the quarter to realize all of the wins.
Great.
Yeah, let me check and see if there's any other questions. Patty said, thank you. I was going to ask if there were any pieces of advice that you might give for companies, for-profit, nonprofit, who are thinking about going with OKRs as a methodology and perhaps picking a tool like Profit to use. What pieces of advice would you share for them?
I think three things I would probably put on that list. Number one, if you're a leader, do your homework and do your research early and really make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. It puts a lot of responsibility on me as the senior leader in the organization to do that, right? And you're asking your divisional leaders or your department leaders or that to also take on that same level of work responsibility. And so I think it is just know what you're getting yourself into and what you're signing up for. The values and the gains are tremendous and what we've seen in our case and really have benefited from that. I think the Profit that code tool is fantastic in terms of really helping us move. And we had started off with another solution the first time that we went down this with one of the teams that I was on, and the tool was okay. It did what it needed to do. But there's just a lot of good features in the Profit Deco tool that really helps make that piece. And so I think having the right solution that meets the needs and really being intentional, and I think interrogating the product early in your process, so that when you start, you have not only here's what the methodology says, but you have an understanding what the capabilities and the tool are and how that can help you. Similar to that, though, I think I would also separate that the tool is not the methodology and the methodology is not the tool. The tool,
Right.
the software solution helps you implement the methodology more effectively, but it's not just, and I think when you train people, you need to really help them buy into the concept of OKRs and why they're committed to that. And that's going to make people motivated, not just, oh, here's this tool and look what all it can do on a project management side. I think that's not going to motivate your leaders. It's not going to motivate your people. But if you come back to and really drive with, this is about bringing focus to the organization, aligning by what we're trying to do, creating greater transparency, and really stretching for amazing, compelling results, that's going to bring the people to the table. And then you've got to deliver that with something that works. And I think that, there's that. I think the other piece that I would offer as advice to someone when they get started is think through who your early adopters are and what those teams that are going to be committed to getting it right. If you think you're going to start with the whole of the enterprise, and it's going to be confusing. I was learning it. I'm still learning the methodology, and I've been writing OKRs for 4 years now. And I'm still learning it and trying to get better at it and advise teams and leaders on that space. And so if you don't enter it with a how am I getting this right approach, and a level of humility, that's crucial. The other piece to it too, though, is that you also you have to set your rhythms and hold to them for a little while. You can't change your rhythms every month, because then that's also going to, so get it right with a small group, and then scale it up over time.
Great. And how long would you say you had it sort of at the leadership level before you were ready to sort of expand it? Was that a quarter or two, or what was the timeline?
I think we were at 2 quarters when we made the decision to scale it up, but it was probably by the 4th quarter before we had other people in the mix on that scale. And then we're just going through a cycle right now after another year at the cycle, saying, okay, team leaders in your sub teams, in your field locations, which ones are we going to bring in now? And what's the support package that team needs to be successful? And, I think it's not the work and the discipline doesn't go away after a couple of years. And I think that's what makes a professional athlete gifted and successful. And that is because they show up to practice, they go through the fundamentals, they go through it every single time. It's the same thing with any other business practice or operating practice. You've got to continue to lean into it. But I think that it does yield the fruit in the long term.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. One other question is around coaches. We talk about training coaches so that, beyond the implementation of the methodology and the tool, how do you build those subject matter experts, not only on how to help with planning and the check-ins during the execution phase, and then also facilitating perhaps the reset or retrospective, but how many coaches, I think you called them something else, Mile, but are those in your, across your organization to help you either with new folks that are coming on board, learning the strategy solutions, or learning how to write OKRs or use the tool? What's the sweet spot on those subject matter experts that you have across the org?
Yeah, so I don't know that we're kind of OKR focal point or the Shepherd we use, but
Shepherd, yeah.
I think Shepherd comes from the book, and we've used that a little bit. But really where we've said is we want every team to have one person who really is the go-to, make sure that their team is following through all the pieces, some of the technical questions, things like that. It's a lot to learn for everyone to learn all the technical pieces. But there's a woman in my office who's just one of my closest advisors. She's my director of strategic execution, and she really has shepherded for the whole of the enterprise. What does it look like to design this? She's sitting there thinking through, this is the cascade structures, this is how we're building that out, this is how that alignment's going to come to be. And that has incredible impact on the whole enterprise, and her ability to kind of think through that so that everybody else doesn't have to think through alignments and structure and these things to make it work is so crucial for making momentum. And then that role of mentoring and coaching and guiding other people at different team levels just has a deep impact and building adaptation, seeing progress, moving that forward. And there's a lot of work that goes into really making it a successful process. And so you've got to put resources and time into that. It's not something that just hits on autopilot and happens as is. A great tool certainly brings some efficiencies associated with that. But, if you're not committed to prioritizing to make it work, then it doesn't. And so I think, she's, does a lot of the trouble shooting for individual teams. She's communicating regularly with the Profit.co team about, hey, this would be a really good feature. Can we try this? What's the best way to put this in and really seeing that benefit.
That's awesome. She sounds like your OKR ambassador.
That's right.
Yeah.
I call her sometimes the OKR czar.
Nice.
So I think there's lots of titles that float around with that, but it's just
I think it's important. Yeah, to your point, to have that rigor across the organization, even to sort of do that audit to make sure that the balance of OKRs are consistent across the org is really important. So having that, whether it's an OKR community of practice, community of coaches, or your ambassador czar to advise and be that shortcut for folks around the tool, as well as how to put, what they need to get done into the methodology. I think that's huge. It saves time for everyone to have that kind of expertise.
Indeed.
Yeah. Great. Well, let me check in with our folks. I can't believe we've almost burned up an hour on the webinar. I think that we could just keep talking and see if there's any other questions. One more about leading and lagging indicators. So I often find lagging indicators are usually when we're closing out our financials, right? And we validate, yes, we hit our marks. How much would you say you factor in leading and lagging indicators when you write your key results?
This was a huge learning point for us as an organization. And, when we got the training on the front end, it was right there. You need the lead, you need the lag, you need the balance of the two. But I think we consistently have seen the value in that, because those lead indicators oftentimes are the only thing that you have. Sometimes you're setting an annual objective and you're really dependent on a monthly basis or quarterly basis on those lead indicators. And you're not going to see theirs, especially in a lot of the programmatic work that we do and the implementation side of things. The financials are financials. You can see financials every month. You can see even the effects on the lag and the lead. But knowing if you're going to hit a certain programmatic target or see the life change in the clients of the organization and the program participants, and are we really seeing that long term? It might even be 2 years before you know that result. But it's what you're doing today and making sure you've really thought through what must be done today to get that result then. And are we being faithful in following through on our commitment to that, and hoping that we'll see the results that we need in the end.
Nice. I hear too in some of your examples that some of your projects might be multiple quarters. And so you've got to break up those key results as chunks for each quarter to build foundationally upon eventually your go live of whatever event that might be. Did you find it was hard to sort of chunk that up by quarter, or once you started thinking about it, it sort of bubbled up to be more manageable?
Definitely. And I think even some meetings we're having today thinking about next year, it was kind of well, what's the interplay between really wanting the team engaging on a quarterly basis, but knowing there are big picture annual things we're trying to achieve and how to do that. And, I think sometimes you just have to set a system that everybody can work with, knowing that 80-90% of the time it really works well. Sometimes you're going to have objectives that they're going to stick a quarter over your annual year, or this is here, and I think sometimes there's a lag on our programmatic data coming up to the field, where sometimes even those lag indicators aren't tabulated until after we've closed out the quarter or after we've closed out the year. And so those lead indicators really help with that. But again, I think it does come back to just that simple question: what must be done today? What must we do on this quarter to be successful in and getting to that bigger picture goal, and knowing what that goal is, right? And I think one of my favorite objectives that one of the teams has written is, increase the capacity of the organization to respond to the global refugee crisis. And so saying here that a crucial part of the work that we do is welcoming as many refugees to this country as we can in a year. So we're motivated by the steps that we take today, whether it's opening up a new office location, whether it's submitting a proposal that's going to give us the resources we need to do that, whether it's training staff to be able to handle new staff to handle the new caseload, or recruiting the new staff to come in and handle that caseload, and having that focus of the big picture goal that's inspirational long term, oftentimes out of reach in the immediacy, but knowing that we've got to take actions today if really we want to achieve it. That's at the heart, is just so crucial and so fundamental to getting the impact that we desire.
Wow. And I mean, that was a great way to wrap up our webinar. I am so honored to have had time with you. I'm so very impressed and moved by your company's mission, and I sincerely will be volunteering, so you'll hear from me later. I want to thank you for carving out the time. Thank you for all the folks that have joined us. Mael, any last remarks that you'd like to share with the folks that have joined?
I think, I don't know everybody on this list, but I think if you, like me, are in the nonprofit sector, and I think that was kind of the advertising that went out with this, hopefully, you are inspired and encouraged thinking about the mission that you have as an organization and what you're called to do in that work, and the deep motivations that you have in that work, and can see, I think, I have a team member of mine who always talks about, and we're a faith-based organization. We really believe that we're guided in the work that we do by God, and saying we just have to be faithful in doing what we're set out to do, and let the other pieces work themselves out, and let God be faithful in that. And so for us, I think that's just, whatever your motivation is in the work, and thinking through your clients, knowing that there's great needs in the world, and wanting to do everything we can to do our work the best we can, and for those that we serve, for those that we care about. And I think that's just a crucial part. So hopefully, if you're interested to think about OKRs in the future, what that looks like and how you step into that, hopefully that's a part of your motivation today to get into this and to take it to the next level.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I couldn't close any better than that statement. I appreciate you. I appreciate your partnership with Prophet, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.